fostering sustainable practices and catalyzing economic and social innovation. Together, ladies and gentlemen, we will uncover how informed, committed, and proactive leadership can turn the tide against climate change and pave the way for a resilient, sustainable future. Thank you once again for joining us in this vital conversation, and I look forward to a day of insightful dialogue and collaboration. I would like to kindly congratulate the facilitators ahead of their presentation, Dr. Amma, Birago, Kantanka, Gyimah, and then Dr. Nathaniel T Blama. We wish you well, and we are keenly following your subtopics, unleashing the creativity of professionals to combat climate change, an opportunity for global. And the second one, transformational leadership for sustainability. So I'll hand over to the MC for the day. And we are paying rapt attention to learn from you. Thank you so much for joining, and stay tuned for the next 2 hours. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, our honorable chair, for such a wonderful remarks, and which also serve as an introductory remarks for our presentation for today. And before we get to the our first speaker, our first facilitator for the day, I began by saying that, you see, climate change stands as one of the most pressing challenges of our time. And it means that as leaders, there is a need for immediate and innovative action to be taken. So we as members of this noble professional body need to be aware and know what climate change is and what role that we can also play in it. Because there has been so many traditional approaches that have been used by several other people. But as leaders, what do we know about climate change? And what do we stand to gain when we get to abreast ourselves with issues of climate change? How can we also impact others? Or how can we also lead others to address issues of climate change? So our first facilitator for the day is in the person of Dr. Mrs. Amma Birago Kantanka Gyimah. Dr. Birago Kantanka Gyimah seeks to bridge the gap between scientific research and practice, which is basically her passion. She is a development practitioner and also a researcher. And her interest is to ensure that development efforts are backed by empirical evidence to mark societal actors better. And her areas of specialty are climate change communication, education and awareness creation, development policy and planning, and gender dynamics and entrepreneurship. Dr. Mrs. Amma Birago Gyimah Kantanka, welcome to CILG Public Lecture 2024. We are keenly waiting to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asaribediakun Adams. I'm also very happy to be here. As I give my introductory remarks, I will kindly ask that you allow me share my slides as the host.
Yes, kindly share.
Okay. So good evening to all of us. Like I said, I am highly privileged to be among the top leaders of our day and to share some thoughts with all of us on the issues of climate change and how we can assess some opportunities as leaders to make impacts in the area of climate change. I would not take extra time to introduce myself as I have already been introduced. But before I proceed, I'll kindly ask if my slides are visible to everybody.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And so Today, as Doctor said, if leaders do not know about the current most stressing issue of our day, then it becomes difficult for leaders to make an impact and make a contribution. And so it is imperative that as leaders, we contribute our quota to ensure and understand, first of all, the issues around climate change, which is the current most important developmental stressor, so that we can make our contributions. And so my hope is that at the end of my presentation, I would have expose all of us to some basic understanding of what climate change is and what are the causes, what are the effects, what are the evidences, what are our stance in terms of climate change. Do we even believe that it exists? And then we'll also look at what roles we can play and what opportunities are there for us to make an impact, and also what kind of help we can get in our efforts to make an impact. And so I quickly go on to the issue of climate change. And so when we talk about climate change, it is basically an alteration of the Earth's climatic patterns over a very long period of time. And so we are looking at temperature, we are looking at precipitation, we are looking at wind patterns, which consistently change for a period of 30 years and above. And so when we notice that there are changes in temperature, there are changes in precipitation, there are changes in wind patterns, pressure, among other climatic variables, and this change has been consistent for a period of 30 years and above, then we can say that indeed the climate is changing. If these things are happening and it is not up to a period of 30 years and above, we can talk about climate variability. I am sure that some of us have heard the term climate variability, but climate variability ultimately leads to climate change when we have studied the patterns and realized that the changes are significant for a period of 30 years and above. And we realize that these things do not happen by themselves. There are certain causes, and there are things that cause these changes to occur. And so there are two major causes of climate change. There is the natural climatic forces, which over a very long period of time, scientists identified that there were certain minute changes that were occurring. But after the Industrial Revolution, it was realized that these changes were happening at a very rapid rate. And so it was found that the anthropogenic factors, that is the human activities, are the major contributors to climate change. And therefore, the United Nations, CCC, and the IPCC have an interest to ensure that the human factors that are causing climate change can be addressed. And so you realize that on this slide, we see some of the causes. Of course, you see rapid industrialization, as I said. When we went into the industrial age, we had to burn a lot of fossil fuel, a lot of coal then, and a lot of energy to be able to bring about the industrialization that we needed at the time. High energy demands and high energy use, these are causes of climate change. And then we have agricultural practices that also contribute to climate change. We also have deforestation that contributes to climate change, consumer practices, livestock, transport, resource extractions, and pollutions. Now, when we are talking about these causes or these things, what do they necessarily do to cause these changes in the climate? You realize that the emissions of certain gases, which are called the greenhouse gases, and these are mostly in the area of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitric acid. And when these gases are released into the atmosphere, they get trapped into the atmosphere, and so does not allow a trapped heat that is supposed to go into the atmosphere and return back. It traps it and concentrates heat in the atmosphere, causing what we call or we know as the global warming. And so when we are burning a fossil fuel or coal or whatever it is, what it's releasing into the atmosphere is these gases, the carbon dioxide. Agricultural practices also release a gas that is known as methane. When through animal rearing, animals release a gas through their processing. They release a gas that is known as methane. And then the use of fertilizers also release these gases. So these are the gases that are released that cause climate change. And so deforestation, we know that when there are trees in around, they absorb the carbon dioxide. And so when there are no trees that serve as a carbon sink, then it means that this carbon dioxide gets trapped into the atmosphere and then contributes to the climate change we see. And then consumer practices. If the consumer behavior of using things and throwing them away and buying new things and all that kind of lifestyle that has been developed means that we need to continue to produce. And so industrialization, we keep producing things that do not have high quality, get spoiled easily, and keep producing. The consumer practices also contribute to the concentration of mostly carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I have already talked about livestock, and then the issue of transport. We use fuel in our transport activities, and all these release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And then resource extractions also contribute, because the machinery and all the things that we use even in our extraction contributes highly to the release of gases, and also affecting the biodiversity and the ecosystems which support the climate system. And so all these things contribute and cause what we know to be climate change. When these things release these gases and the climate is changing due to the excess warming, then we have certain effects that come up as a result. We see that now temperatures rise beyond the levels that we know. We also see that there is rising sea level because there is melting of the glaciers, and so it results in the increase in the volume of water, and so we encounter rising sea levels. We also have unpredictable weather patterns. We also encounter increase in extreme weather events, such as droughts, such as wildfires, and the like. We also encounter land degradation, loss of life and biodiversity. When all these things happen, there is an impact on social actors, and this leads to displaced people, poverty, loss of livelihood, hunger, malnutrition, increased risk of diseases, and global food and water shortages. This slide goes to just expand on the effects of climate change. The rising sea level, we see that there is more and worse droughts, with animal rearing becoming difficulty, and then farming also becoming a problem. We also encounter more heat-related illnesses, and then heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke. These are some of the heat-related illnesses that come about in the event of climate change. We also encounter more animal extinctions, and then more and worse forest fires. There's more and worse storms. And then farmers are desperate because the soil fertility is lost, the grounds become drier. In terms of drought, in cases where there is flooding, you still cannot use the land to farm and produce. And so food security becomes a challenge, and everybody is basically affected by the impacts of climate change. Now, with all this that we are talking about, I am sure that there is nobody on this platform who has not heard about climate change, and who has not, one way or the other, encountered these things, at least in our most recent days of extreme precipitation. When it's raining so hard with intense winds and all that. The months that it's expected for it to rain, we don't see it. And the months that we don't expect it to rain, Those are the months we see that it is raining, unpredictable weather patterns. All these are quite evident to us. But in spite of all this, there are different category of people and what they think about climate change and their stance on climate change. So they are the alarmists, the people who create high alarm and alerts about climate change, and immediately you listen to them, you feel like tomorrow we all die. And that is a category that exists. We also have a category of concerned people who don't only talk about climate change, but take certain actions towards trying to address the issues of climate change. We also have the cautious, those who know about it and are watching to see, okay, what is possible, what can we do? They don't necessarily make much impact, but they don't doubt the existence of climate change. There are those who are disengaged about this whole idea, whether it is there or not. I don't care about it. They are just disengaged. And then there is the doubtful, the people who doubt that this thing we are talking about, some call it global politics or whatever it is. So they are the group of people who doubt that climate change does exist. And then they are the dismissive. They dismiss every other thing. So you see that it's a continuum of the extreme left and then the extreme right. Those who believe it and those who don't. And those who believe it, they are the degree to which they want to take an action towards it, and those who don't really believe it and what they decide to do about climate change. And so that those who dismiss it will also try as much as possible to convince others that climate change is a hoax and it does not exist. So I don't know where we stand. Those of us connected on this platform, I don't know where we stand. Where do you think you fall when it comes to the issues of climate change? But I hope that when we have interactions, we'll be able to share where we think we stand with me. Now, I just hope that with some of these few pictorial evidences, I may be able to hopefully convince a few doubters and dismissive people to believe that this thing is really happening. And so when you see the picture on the top left, to my top left, you realize that the effects of sea level rise. And so you realize that now there is no boundary between where the communities live and the shore, the seashore. All these are merging. The sea is creeping into communities, and homes and livelihoods are being destroyed because of the sea level rise issues. To the top right, we realize that there is desertification. There's desertification because of excessive drought. And when droughts are highly prolonged, farmers cannot farm, especially in the northern part where there is extreme and prolonged drought. Farming becomes a problem, and most farms are deserted in this case, hoping that by leaving them this way, they will regain some of their fertility for them to be useful. And then you realize that because of the excessive heat in the atmosphere, issues of bushfires are more dangerous and more rampant in the wake of climate change, because we are even talking about wildfires, which fires that set up by themselves. And so on my bottom left, you realize that it's a whole share forest that has been burnt. And this is somebody's livelihood, and we can imagine what happens to someone who depends on this for their livelihood. We also see the drying up of water bodies. If you look at the picture carefully, you see that the water is receding, the water is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And all these are effects of climate change by virtue of excessive droughts that are happening over time. If you are in Ghana, especially if you live in Accra, I'm sure you would have encountered the excessive flooding that we see. and the damages that come along with the flooding. When the rains pour and the volumes that pour within a short period of time, if even it rains for just 30 minutes or 20 minutes, you realize that the volume of water that is poured within that short period, it's so much, and immediately you see that our systems and things have not been developed, and so immediately flooding occurs. People's livelihoods, resources, and assets get destroyed in the midst of this. And then the drying of water bodies. This one is a water body that is like completely dried, and these are realities. These are actually happening. Some of us, by virtue of where we are, may never have encountered these things, but at least you have seen some form of flooding, at least around us. There are places where their water bodies have been so much destroyed, and water shortage and water stress is a real issue. And this aerial view of when it rains, immediately it rains. Now, this is the picture we have. Accessibility becomes a problem. There are challenges all over. And so climate change is real. It is happening. It is impacting and it is affecting lives. And so what can we do about this? We are called to what we call climate action. And when we say climate action, what is climate action? So when we say climate action basically is efforts and initiatives taken to address and respond to climate change. It's actually a major goal 13 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it is climate action. And it says that we should take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. You realize that climate action is also very central to a number of the, almost every one of the other sustainable development goals. And so by addressing climate change or taking action in climate change, you are looking at issues of hunger, because we are talking about farmers who depend, their activities largely depend on climatic variables. That is what the temperature is, what the rainfall is, how reliable it is. So it means that when this is affected, the issue of hunger is intense. And so the goal on no hunger is directly related to climate action. You can talk about poverty. I mean, when people's livelihoods are affected, this is an issue of poverty. You can talk about gender equality. You realize that most of the most vulnerable when we talk about climate change are women and children. And so almost every one of the Sustainable Development Goals are hinged on taking climate action, because it is the central thing that is affecting us as a people in recent times. And so we want to know, when we are talking about climate action, there are two key variables that are considered. We look at mitigation and adaptation. So when you are taking climate action, it is either you are taking steps to address issues of mitigation or adaptation, or you are trying to do a mixture of both to ensure that you address the issues of climate change. So what is mitigation? Mitigation is just basically actions or changes in societal behavior that is taken to reduce or eliminate greenhouse gases emissions, or to remove greenhouse gas emissions. And so mitigation is trying to avoid climate change, whose major cause is the emission of greenhouse gases. And so when you are taking mitigation actions, you are trying to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, or you are trying to remove the existing greenhouse gases so that the environment will be better off. That is basically mitigation. When you're talking about adaptation, adaptation has to do with building resilience. There are a variety of actions that we take, because we know that we may never ever be able to even remove the impacts of climate change. So as the impacts of climate change exist, what can we do to build our resilience against the effects that will come as a result of climate change? And so there are various actions that are meant to reduce and compensate for or to adapt to the adverse impacts. So we are trying to look at the impacts and how we can adjust ourselves so that we can be able to sustain ourselves in the face of climate change. So these are the two major things when we talk about climate action. And so here, when you are looking at adaptation, you want to changes in land use and relocation. If you are in a place where the place is not conducive, especially those who live along the coast, and you realize that the sea is coming closer, you need to relocate. It's a form of adaptation measure. If you realize that this land is now not producing what it can give me, you would want to change the use of the land to something that it will support. If you realize the emergency and business continuity planning, if you are in business and you realize that, okay, nowadays when it rains, I can't open my shop. This place is prone to flooding. What decisions do I have to make as a business person? In those seasons, what do I do to continue to be in business? It's an adaptation plan. Health programs, helping and supporting people, even education and awareness creation are all forms of adaptation. And so upgrading and hardening of buildings and infrastructure, developing proper infrastructure is also forms of adaptation. Building sea defense walls are forms of adaptation. Looking at alternative sources of livelihood. So if I'm a farmer and now I cannot predict the weather, I can only farm one season, what do I do the rest of the seasons? All these are adaptation plans that we do to build resilience against the impacts of climate change. In terms of mitigation, this is where you hear the energy conservation and efficiency issues moving into the renewables, which do not emit the greenhouse gases, and conserving energy so that we don't use too much of it. Also issues of sustainable transportation. So anything that contributes to the emission of greenhouse gases, you want to reduce it or change it to a much more sustainable action. There are other things that fall in between adaptation and mitigation actions. And so when you build green infrastructure, buildings that are green, that are sustainable, it falls between, because in one way you are using it to adapt to the impacts, and the other way, using green parameters, you are also mitigating climate change. So there are some actions that sit in the middle of both adaptation and mitigation, but there are others that are purely adaptation inclined and others that are purely mitigation inclined. Permit me to say that in our part of the world, the historical trajectory projects that the high contributors to climate change are not the developing world, because we are yet to emit that much. And the developed worlds are those who have the history, who have emitted more. And so though they are much more interested in issues of mitigation, while we are much more interested in issues of adaptation, because the other challenge is that although they have historically contributed more, they have the systems and the support to be able to adapt to climate change with ease. They don't encounter our one day raining, flooding, and all those challenges that easily hit us, because we are poor. We don't have the resources to build the systems to adapt. And so adaptation is very important to us. While they are interested in mitigation, how can we stop this? So you realize that they want us who are now developing rather to use the renewables and stop the fossil fuels, which are now much more available. So the negotiations that are going on is that, okay, if you want me to conserve my forest and not go into industrial and all those things like you did, then it means that you should provide me with resources, technology, and alternative ways of developing. And so you you take care of the cost and whatever is needed for me to go that way. So those are the negotiations and the discussions that go on when there is the conference of parties, when the United Nations framework on climate change and the intergovernmental panel on climate change, the IPCC, when they meet. These are the kind of negotiations and discussions that go on in the area of adaptation and mitigation. Now, here we are, leaders, and leaders are supposed to lead change. Leaders are supposed to drive vision and inspire and empower. And basically, a leader thrives in the face of challenges and problems, because leaders are problem solvers and bring about positive change in society. And so it is a good place to discuss issues of climate change, to see what role can leaders play in the area of climate action. And we all need to put our hands on deck to solve this challenge. And so what opportunities are there in climate action? The first thing I want to talk about is the area of circular economy. When we are talking about leaders, I know we have leaders from the corporate world. We have leaders also from the public space, government sectors and all that. And so in all these areas, one look at the agenda of circular economy. And when we talk about circular economy, it is basically an economic system that is aimed at minimizing waste and making the most of resources. And so when we tap resources and we manufacture something, all we want to say is that when that thing has been consumed and used, we don't just dump it. We look at options of recycling that product to another thing so that it does not just become a waste. And so products and materials are reused, repaired, and recycled to expand their lifespan and reduce the consumption of raw materials. And so when we say circular economy, we want to get to a place where in our production life as an economy or as a people or as a corporate body, we look at things with the view of circular economy. What can we reuse? What can we repair? What can we recycle to expand the life? And all these contribute to climate action. We also look at net zero. Net zero basically is a balance between the amount of greenhouse gases produced and the amount that is removed from the atmosphere. And so you want to create a balance, okay? So there is no deficit. And so it involves reducing greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible and offsetting any remaining emissions through measures such as carbon removal or carbon capture and storage. Carbon removal, carbon capture, and carbon storage are very technical processes that exist, that they use and say they are capturing some carbon out of the system. And so in the efforts of net zero, some companies or organizations, when they take certain actions, they know that their actions contribute. Let me talk about like foresters, the people who cut timber and all that. If you cut a certain amount of timber in the forest, there's a requirement of a certain number of trees that you are supposed to plant and to replace what you have cut. However, you know that it will take a number of years for this tree to replace what you have cut. And so there will still be some deficits. And that is where they look at other options to bring about net zero. Net zero is a goal that organizations and nations set for themselves, that by this time we should get to this place, and we make sure that the actions that we are taking, our objective is to do a net zero action. And so you are thinking about your activities and your actions with net zero at the back of your mind. We're also looking at green buildings. So for those of us in construction, this goes to us. And these are structures designed and constructed with a focus on minimizing their environmental impact and maximizing resource efficiency. This includes using sustainable materials. And so what materials are you using for your construction? You want to think about it. You also want to look at implementing energy efficient designs. So the design that you are giving to your client, is it going to use so much energy, air conditioning here, this here, that here? What can you do so that you can take advantage of natural ventilation, natural lighting, and all that? These are sustainable designs and technologies, and optimizing water usage on site, and even certain systems that you create in the home, certain wastewaters can be used for certain activities. All those comes with design, and it is known as green buildings. And that is another area of climate action that can be looked at. And incorporating renewable energy. So do you use solar energy at certain points, or what do you do? These are important considerations for climate action. We also look at biodiversity. Biodiversity is so important. Some of us who don't care about fauna and flora and fauna, like the insects and the animals and all of that. All some of us see animals to be is for meat and for consumption, but they exist to balance the ecosystem and sustain the climate. They produce a balancing effect. And so if we are not interested in securing the variety and the variability of the livelihoods or life on Earth, especially the diversity of species, they all contribute to sustain the balance of the Earth and the ecosystem. And so biodiversity is essential for the functioning of ecosystem, providing ecosystem services such as water purification, pollination, and climate regulation. We know that we also get certain resources. Come again. Please, did you say something? Okay. So, all right. You realize that we also get certain medications and even nature serving as resorts and things like that to serve us. And so it is important that the ecosystem is important to us and how we take care of it. And being interested in protecting the biodiversity is also a form of climate action. We are also looking at renewable energy, and this is derived from naturally replenishing sources such as sunlight, wind, water, geothermal heat. And common forms of renewable energy include solar power, wind power, hydroelectricity, and biomass. So as much as possible, as I said, in the green architecture or green buildings, inculcating renewable energy and trying to shift onto renewable options is important and serves as climate action. Now, one important thing is carbon footprint. Each of us has a carbon footprint, and it calculates how much of carbon are you emitting into the atmosphere based on your daily activities and actions. And so you realize that the total amount of greenhouse gas, specifically carbon dioxide, emitted directly or indirectly by an individual, organization, event, or product. So as a leader in whichever area you find yourself, you want to see how much our activities emitting carbon, how much of transport activities do we use in our activities, how much energy do we consume in our activities. If your office, we have so many air conditions and so many, the lights are on when they are not needed and all that, these are your carbon footprints. Everybody drives to work. Is it possible to have an office van or something that picks it? I mean, we'll look at the things that we can do to address this, but your carbon footprint, calculating a carbon footprint involves assessing emissions from various sources, including energy consumption, transportation, waste that we generate, because waste also produces a certain form of gas that is released into the atmosphere. and then our industrial processes. And so you take a look at this, and when you make sure you are reducing your carbon footprint, it is a positive climate action. Lastly, on the climate action, we also want to look at what we all know, the corporate social responsibility. And so basically, we know that it's voluntary initiatives and commitments taken by businesses and organizations to address environmental and social issues. So there are different things that we do as corporate bodies as our give back to society. And it is also an important area to look at, that what can I give back to society as a corporate body, as my corporate social responsibility. Remember that you already have your carbon footprint. So what can you give back to society to help address the issues of the environment and other social issues? I have already said that it is the vulnerable and the disadvantaged who are more hit by the impacts of climate change. Because of where probably your house is, when there is flooding, you will not be affected, but look at those at the slums and all that. So when we are talking about corporate social responsibility, you want to look at greenhouse emissions, what you can do about it, increase energy efficiency, transition from renewable to non-renewable, minimize environmental impacts through the supply chain, but most importantly, supporting communities to build resilience, and also engaging in advocacy issues in the area of climate change is an important thing to consider in the area of corporate social responsibility. Now, globally, there are some important people who take certain kinds of actions that have given them some level of commendation as global leaders that contribute to addressing issues of climate change. And so we have Shailene Woodley, and what she did was that she partnered with an environmental NGO in their activities and served as a Greenpeace Ocean ambassador. We also have Leonardo DiCaprio, who is the founder and later merged with Rewild. He donated 1 million to protect the Nepal wild tigers, and also spreads awareness through different documentaries like The 11th Hour. These are just to give us ideas of possible things we can do as leaders in global action, in climate action. We also have Jane, who supports the Cow Earth Environmental Working Group and collaborates to raise charities for organizations fighting climate crisis. We also have Merrill, who co-founded Mothers and Others to support organic agriculture and raises environmental food awareness. She also makes regular charity works and green consumer movement. There are many others who are doing things to make their voice heard and make contributions in this area. What are some basic and simple steps that we can take? First of all, you can make your voice heard by those in power. Our God said that use your voice, use your vote, and use your choice. First of all, you can identify who is your parliamentarian or who takes decisions in your area, and then talk to them about your interest and what you want to be done. We saw what happened in Kenya. We don't want those kinds of violences, but we want our voices to be heard. We want the people who take decisions to know that our lives matter. We are interested in what happens to us. And so we should use our voice. We should also use our vote, and we also use our choices to make a difference. Now, we have talked about animal rearing and its impact on the environment. In fact, Australia is reported as one of the countries that emits the highest amount of methane because they are into a lot of cattle rearing and all that. And you realize that if we learn to eat less meat and less dairy, it means that we are reducing the impacts of climate change. And you say that how we have already developed taste for meat and dairy. How do we cut it down? But basic, simple steps like cutting down, eating less meat and dairy contributes to reducing or positive climate action. And we have heard that it also helps our health in the long run. So why not? Issues of flights. Those of us who take, maybe in our part of the world is not that common, but yeah, if you can use an alternative means of travel, you would want to consider that, because just one trip contributes so much emissions into the atmosphere, and you want to consider that as a responsible leader in the area of climate change. And the issue of driving. Is it possible to take public transport? Is it possible that as an organization, you can look at how you can commute together? Is it possible that if we are all going to a particular place, we can all go together? And also even making sure that you are using the right kind of fuel, and what you are burning into the atmosphere are all important considerations when it comes to the car. Even the choice of car. Some of us like using very, very big flamboyant cars, and you know that just by stepping on it like that, the amount of gas that is released is an issue. Would you want to consider that you use a less high consuming vehicle? You get a much more simpler one that does not take so much energy. That is also a way of being responsible to the environment. And even the way we drive, there's a way that you drive and your legs are just on the paddle and you are not emitting that much. Even that is a contribution to climate action. Reducing your energy use and bills, be respecting and protecting green spaces, bank and invest your money responsibly. Some of us have lots of money invested in banks and all that, and some of us are not interested in what the banks are investing our monies in. If you are a responsible climate actor, you want to engage your bankers and your investments, be interested in what they are investing your money in, and making sure that what is being invested is not negatively impacting our environment. You want to also cut consumption and waste, and you want to talk about the changes you are making, because the more you talk about it, you encourage others and get others on board the issues of climate change. We are almost ending, and we are looking at opportunities in climate action. You realize that some of these things that we have talked about, they contribute to cost management, because the things that we continue to use, if we are reducing, if we are reusing and all that, it cuts down on some of the wastage and the cost that we incur in our corporations and homes and wherever we find ourselves. We also realize that there are new opportunities. If we are talking about green buildings, if we are talking about renewable energy and all that, these are new areas of opportunity that you can look at how you can invest in. Can you get into the manufacture or the imports of much more sustainable products and all that? These are new revenue opportunities that we can explore. And then it helps us to use resources more efficiently. It also builds healthier and more connected communities by getting involved in adaptation measures, supporting communities, even if it's an office and now we all decide to commute together. It builds a certain bond and builds healthier communities and societies. It also encourages innovation, because in this climate age, it's all about what innovations can we bring about? What green energies and everything green is what we're talking about. So what innovations can we contribute to this? And then we also enhance global endorsement. You realize that in this day and age of climate change, if your brand is not taking actions that are in line with climate action, you realize that globally it will be difficult for you to enter certain markets and certain alignments, because now there are certain questions and things that you are asked before you are given certain opportunities. And so how can you go more paperless as an organization and all that? I mean, small steps. And so the more you do this, the more global endorsement and opportunities of partnership that you get. And then there are also opportunities to access some funds that are available to make inroads in some of the climate action areas that we have already spoken about. So briefly, there are some of these funds: the Global Environmental Facility, the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, and then there are small grants for communities and vulnerable groups. And then these funds are aimed at supporting and developing countries in assessing financial resources for climate-related projects and initiatives. So you may want to explore them and see how your organization or whatever can take advantage of some of these facilities that exist. Now, as a closing remark, realize that by and large, people in general are getting much more concerned. Their attitudes and behaviors are increasingly moving towards a sustainable lifestyle. And so, as global leaders, we stand a chance of drawing meaningful connections with clients, being environmentally sensitive. And so global leaders may not stay relevant for long if they do not make meaningful progressions towards positive climate action while standing numerous benefits that come along with climate action. I thank you for your rapt attention, and I will hand over to the moderator to continue. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Mrs. Amma, Birago, Gyimah. I know it's been a wonderful session, and colleagues, you can bear with me with the insights she shared with us on the climate change and what we need to know as leaders. We have questions. There's a question that has been sent to me. We'll allow 3 questions. After these 3 questions, they will bring in our next facilitator to continue. So I'll read my first question, which is basically from a coordinating director. And this goes directly to you, Dr. Gyimah. He's saying that as a district coordinating director, how can I communicate effectively to my constituents to understand the effect of climate change in our community, on our community?
Okay. So thank you so much for the question. I think that from research that we do in rural communities and all that, it is evident that rural dwellers are aware of climate change. You know, it's not only about the scientific evidence, but they also have indigenous knowledge that tells them, and they see it's all over around us. And so it's not about the technicalities of climate change. I mean, what is happening around us is enough evidence, and it is clear that climate change is happening. So I would say that just using the examples around you is enough to explain to your constituents about what is happening and how together as a community we can take action to address the issues. If it is about making sure that now the volume and intensity of rain that is coming, it was not like previously. You say now it is so evident, and it makes it even much more easier to explain, and then letting them know that what can we do about it? Let us be each other's keeper. Let us make sure the drains are not choked. Let us make sure that waste is not is disposed properly. Let us encourage reduction of use of certain materials, the recycling and all that. And so I believe that some of these basic things are ways that the coordinating director can educate his constituents. And I'm sure that districts, assemblies, and municipalities also have the environmental protection agencies there. And so their reps can also assist them in this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Birago. Any question, please? The floor is open for questions. The floor is open for questions. So whilst we put down our question, we would like to bring in, due to our time, it's 6:11 now. We would like to bring in our next facilitator to continue. And interestingly, our next facilitator happens to also have worked with the Environmental Protection Agency in Liberia. And he's also coming in to share with us his worth of experience in such areas. So I present to you Mr. Our next facilitator, Mr. T Blama. Hello, please, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep. Okay, so I was getting some feedback here, so I thought my voice was not that audible. Okay, so I said I present to you our next facilitator. He is in the person of Dr. Nathaniel T Blama, and he is currently the managing partner and CEO of Planet Resources Management Incorporated and an environmental consultancy firm. He is also a lecturer of global environmental management at the School of Global Affairs, Graduate School of Studies, Curtin University, Monrovia, Liberia. And that's from 2021 2023. He also served as the government relations manager, country director for Ivan Liberia Limited, a subsidiary high power exploration. He was appointed by the President of the Republic of Liberia to serve as the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Environmental Protection Agency of Liberia. A call to national service he humbly accepted and served with diligence and commitment from March 5th, 2018 to August 5th, 2020. Ms. Dr. Nathaniel T Blama, please, we are ready for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Distinguished members of this platform, I see we've been followed by up to 25 members already, and that's good. I'd just like to start by thanking the organizers and also thanking the first presenter who eloquently dealt with a lot of the issues. And I might have to omit a lot of my slides because she went deep into it, but I want to focus more on the issue that is confronting us, especially when it has to do with transformation. I'm trying to see if I can load my slide. My computer is not acting well. But if I don't get my slide loaded, what I might do is, after the presentation, I will send it on to the organizers and they can share it with the platform. But I'm having problem with loading my slides. Hello, is that okay for you? Can I proceed?
Yes, please, can you proceed?
Okay.
Yes, please, can you proceed?
All right. So for me, the outline that I'm going to use for my presentation today, basically, I'm going to be presenting on the topic that was given to me. I'm trying to stick to the topic because the area is broad when we talk about climate change and sustainability. But I was asked to talk on transformational leadership and climate sustainability. Now, for us to talk about what I want to use for my outline is basically to look at, first of all, the definition or the understanding of transformational leadership. I also like to look at climate action, which our previous presenter spoke a lot about. But beyond climate action, I also like to look at clean energy. And I also like to look at African youths and the opportunity that lies there. Because if we should look at transformational leadership, it's often said that the youth are the future leaders. But then I think the youth are the now leaders. They are the treasure of Africa, and they can take action now to save our world and create opportunities. There lies a lot of opportunities for the young people in Africa. So we're going to be dealing with that briefly. And then we'll wrap up on that in concluding some of the issues. Now, transformational leadership. When you hear the concept of transformational leadership, what comes to mind? The first thing people would normally think is kind of leadership that drives change, you know. But beyond driving change is a kind of leadership style that can inspire positive change. And I like to emphasize on that word, inspire positive change. The reason why it is important, there are a lot of leaders that have inspired change across Africa that has become detrimental to the African continent. So when we talk about transformational leadership, it's the kind of leadership that inspires positive change in those that follow. Not just a change, but it has to be a change in those that follow. Now, there's a Chinese proverb that I like to always quote. It says, if you claim to be a leader and you are leading a group of people and no one is following, then you are just taking a walk. Because a leader is someone with two goals. One, they are going somewhere, and two, they are taking people along. So to be able to translate transformational leadership, you must inspire positive change to the follower. Transformational leadership, transformational leaders are also generally energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about the things they want to do. It's important to note, you cannot impact positive change without being energetic, without putting all of your energy into it, and without drawing the kind of enthusiasm that is needed to drive that change. Because there will be times, there will be nights, there will be days you will be alone. There will be time that even the vision that you're carrying, people may not understand it, but in the future, you know, they will come to understand it. And most importantly, you must be very passionate about it. You cannot drive a change to transform a community, a society, a nation without being passionate about it. You cannot be over opportunistic about the change you want to. Most times in Africa, people initiate a change process that never succeeds because they look more into the opportunistic part than the passionate part. The passion is what is going to drive you rather than the immediate gain. People look for instant gratification in the change of leading process, which normally people will not succeed if you lead in that way. Not only are those leaders concerned and involved in the process, but they are also focused on helping every member of their team to succeed together. So transformational leaders are focused on helping their team members to succeed. Transformational leaders also take control by conveying a clear vision to the group on the goals they are about to lead with. The leader have to make it clear to the people that they are leading that this is what we want to do and this is how we want to do it, so that they get a buy-in. Most times in Africa, people don't follow people because their vision is not clear. The goals are not clear. The objectives are not clear. So a lot of time, people are confused if you're sure of what you really want to do. So they get caught up in the system of, are we doing the right thing? Are we not doing the wrong? Are we not doing the wrong thing? But if your goals are clear and clearly conveyed to those that are following, in most instances, they run with the vision and the goals. Because when it is achieved, it's not about you. It's about the general group, the general group of the society, of the community, of the institution you represent. So to lead a group of people, you have to be passionate about it, but also you have to communicate the goals clearly. And transformational leaders have a marked passion for the work and how to get it done. Reaching out to the people they lead and getting their buy-in. Transformational leaders focus on helping members of their team members of their group, members of their community, members of their country, so that they work together and provide guidance support for one another. And that kind of action will inspire people to move the process forward. Now, our previous presenter talked about a lot about climate action, a lot of the things that I noted, I would try to skip them. But because I want to link transformational leadership with climate action and the opportunity that lies in there for African youth. So I would just delve into it, climate action a bit. She talked about a lot, but climate action is a process through which, for me, I think it's a process through which governments, civil society groups, communities, and individuals are leading efforts to combat climate crisis and to create good jobs and stimulate a clean industry and to ensure sustainability. I'd like to go over that. Climate action is a process through which governments, civil society groups, communities, and individuals. I try to lay out because most times people think that only government should drive the change. The previous speaker talked about everybody's involvement. Yes, it is a responsibility of everybody to get involved because our individual environmental footprints also affects the environment. There are little actions we take that impact the environment. So it behooves all of us at community level, individual level, societal level, groups, community level, to get involved in leading the change to combat climate change. It doesn't matter how big the steps have to be. Little steps can create great rewards. So do not look for the big things to do. Do what you can do at your level. Look in your community. Look in your look in your school. If you are in school, you can take little actions. If it is just, say, for example, marking recycle bins and putting it out there, making sure people don't litter just anywhere. Those are action. Those are also climate action. So everyone has a responsibility and they can participate at their individual levels to ensure the sustainable management of the environment and to adequately contribute to climate action. Climate action also seeks to develop resilience and capacity to manage climate change. Now, she talked about mitigation and adaptation. You know, to adapt to the impact of climate change, you have to build resilience. You know, some of us that live along coastal cities, coastal communities, we have felt the brunt and the impact of climate change with massive coastal erosion. And some of us are also come from communities where in Africa, most of us live on agriculture and our people do sustainable farming. And not many people in our part of the world do mechanized farming, even though the mechanized farming are big industries that produce rubber and oil palm, but not for direct consumption. But even that, they are impacted by climate change. And so their issue of food security, the erratic changing weather and rain pattern affects the farming season and affects the farmer in terms of when they plant their crops and when they do the harvesting. And so with the erratic weather now that we have and the excessiveness of the weather, this year we had the highest temperature ever recorded in history in the most recent past globally. And those of us in Africa, we can attest to that. We know how it felt. And there were places in Europe where, you know, villages got burned because of the impact. But also in Africa, what we are now experiencing is the increase in rainfall. The inches of rainfall has increased because of, obviously, I mean, the elementary science we learn about evaporation. You know, you clear that with the excessive sun that we had during the dry season, that's, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that you will also have heavy rainfall this year. So those of us that live in floodplain and along coastal communities, you should expect flooding, you know, and what have you. Now, we talk about climate action to produce or strengthen clean energy industry. Now, when we talk about clean energy industry, we talk about wind, solar, bioenergy, and hydro. In Africa, for example, bioenergy, sometimes we call it waste to energy. It will interest you that that's an opportunity that lies in Africa. I visited Europe and I visited America, and I saw across Europe and America, most major cities have waste to energy plants, sometimes 2-3 plants in one city, in position in different locations. But in Africa, where we generate a lot of waste, and in most of our cities, waste is a menace that is affecting the community and affecting the livelihood of our people. It behooves me to wonder why we don't have waste to energy processing facilities in Africa. We're still building landfills, which is not good because of the high concentration of garbage or waste in a place generates methane gas, which is also harmful for the environment. And so it behooves me to wonder why are we not taking advantage of the opportunity. So that's something we all, those that are policymakers, need to start to think about. The only thing that can wrap my hand around and see the reason, because it solves multiple problems. It's a win-win situation. It solves environmental problem. It solves the issue of energy. Most of our African cities suffer from energy power shortages. In fact, most of our city at night, we run diesel generator all over the place, because I know every major hotels in Africa have 2-3 backup system generators to kick in just in case there are power outage. Sometimes power goes off for hours, sometimes for days, even some places for weeks. But then why are we not using what we have? Waste to energy can be a major solution problem for us, because it solves environmental problem, it solves waste problem, it solves health problem, and it solves energy problem. It still beats my imagination to think on why Africa hasn't benefited or expanded. I think across Africa, especially Sub-Saharan Africa, I know of a group that was trying to build one in Ghana. I don't know if they completed that process. But across Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa to be precise, I think we have less than 5 waste to energy plants, which is mind-boggling. Obviously, we have a lot of rivers in Africa. Like in Liberia, we have 6 major rivers that run from north to south, and because of our positioning, our major source of energy right now is hydro, even though it's under capacity. We still haven't been able to produce the kind of hydro energy to supply our communities. Liberia, we did an energy audit for Liberia, I think 10 or 12 years ago. And Liberia energy capacity is around 1,500 megawatts of electricity that will be needed to stabilize at 85 or 90%. So now, with all of the initiative, the hydro, the CLSG line, the transport, West African Power Pool, the mini plants that we have, we have less than 325 megawatts of electricity provision. That tells you we are under capacity, that we are producing just about 20% capacity. So you can imagine when there are power outages and people complaining across the city, I laugh, I say, we don't have the generation, so we cannot supply everybody. But it's a fact. But it also, we have opportunities that we've not been able to tap into. And I think clean energy solution, those all provide opportunities. Solar, obviously, we have a lot of sun here. Sun harvest, the only thing about solar is very expensive. The one-off cost for solar installation is very expensive. So a lot of time, individuals cannot invest in it, because even though it has a guarantee of 10 to 15 years, some of the batteries takes 5 years to be replaced, but the running cost is very low. It's the cheapest, it has the cheapest running cost, but it's one of the most expensive per capita in terms of investment, upfront investment. Wind, some of our areas have wind potential. Most countries around here, we haven't been able to tap into the wind. In Liberia, for example, there was a study done by Royal Haskoning many years back, and is a Dutch group that come out of the Netherlands, and they did a study of our wind potential. We do have wind potential, but it's off the coast, in the oceans, because some part of, especially along the city, we have a lot of, about 2/3 of our population live along the coastal cities, and most of our coastal cities are either equal to or below sea level, some of them. So obviously, to harvest wind along the coastline, it has to be in inland. It can be inland. There are sort of other potential area up north that has wind potential, but we haven't explored that. So now coming to the issue, trying to balance it, Africa, the opportunities that lie. When we're talking about transformational leadership, it is a clarion call now for young people in Africa to stand up and take the charge. Africa has the youngest population in the world, with 70% of sub-Saharan Africa under the age of 30. You can imagine that. There was an estimate shows that almost 500 million, Africa have almost 500 million of its population are youth. You know, and 70%, 60 to 70% of that amount are below the age of 30. Now you can see the potential that Africa has. You know, such a high young population is an opportunity for the continent's growth. You know, but only if the generation, but only if these new generation of young people are empowered, fully empowered to realize their best potential. And realizing their best potential, it means we have to empower them to see the opportunity that lies in them so that they can explore. A lot of the time, most African youth only think about survival for today. We are in a survival mood, so we are not in a place of thinking about tomorrow. A lot of African youth can be innovative, but because they are in a survival mood, so the thought of thinking about tomorrow is less of an importance. They are more important about what they can do, what they can get, and how they can survive today. It's a sad thing. We need to put the African youth to work so that they can annex their potential and so that they can compete with the rest of the world, especially in the areas of climate action. Why it is true that climate change impacts Africa. Climate change is a menace. Climate change has been a degrading factor to Africa. African youth are not only impacted by the impact of climate change, but African youth also possess the immense potential to contribute to sustainable development and climate change resilience. It is that kind of opportunity that we need to inspire African youth to tap into true transformational leadership. It is about time that people who want to help the young people to lead, inspire them in this direction. Africa is looking for young leaders, young entrepreneurs who will look in this providing transformational leadership and taking appropriate climate action. By doing those, for example, waste can be wealth creation. You can do waste and create wealth through waste recycling and through waste to energy. A lot of time people think about waste. I always say when you hear the word waste, also think about wealth, because waste can also create wealth. But how do young people get involved to getting participating in using waste to create wealth? They need to be educated, they need to be aware, and need to be empowered. Unfortunately, most of our banking systems in Africa do not support too much of these things. I heard our presenter talking about support from the UNFCCC, or Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, and all these different funding mechanisms that are there globally. I headed the Environmental Protection Agency of Liberia before. The opportunities are there, but the restriction in accessing these funds are too rigid. You know, they are too rigid to the point where no individual community group can easily access. The money end up going back to the multilateral fund, multilateral agencies like the World Bank, like UNDP, FAO, and all of them. Only they can access the fund. And then they come and set different criteria on how communities can access it. I know through the SGP, the Small Grants Program, also, I think that's one of the most effective programs that have helped communities in across Africa. But most of the programs, accessing funding, they do not have programs. I had a meeting with the African Development Bank one time. You know, how do you develop small grant funding for small African who want to get involved in waste recycling or waste to energy processing, you know, or create waste awareness and creation, tree planting programs, renewable energy, coastal protection. You know, how do you get African involved into these things? How do you get young people involved? It's soon about getting them and letting them have access to finance that they will be able to innovate and be able to get involved with effective climate action. Anything short of that, we keep doing lip service. We keep talking about signs of climate change, but the real issue of addressing the issues of climate change, helping communities to adapt, you know, and helping nations to mitigate some of this impact, we will not be able to succeed if we do not get the young people involved and let them take positive action. I'd like to end on this note, and I say thanks for the time.
Hello? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Blama, for such a powerful presentation. And as colleagues, we've all heard from Dr. T Blama what presentations given to us now. So we want to open the floor for questions, for contribution, for clarification, for the presentations that we've had so far. That of Dr. Blama and that of the others. So my first question to Dr. Nathaniel T Blama is you made mention of the numerous barriers to funding when it comes to climate change here in Africa for the youth. So in your own opinion, how can we mitigate such an issue? How do we find a solution to that?
Okay, for me, I think there should be a twin approach to that. one of the reasons, in my understanding, one of the reasons why there are biases and restriction on accessing funding from these global systems is because even our countries, our nations do not budget for it. Say, for example, from the Global Environment Facility. The Global Environment Facility will give more funding to countries who can provide co-financing for projects. So if, for example, Liberia, the government of Liberia, through its national budgeting process, say we're going to put 10 million in the national budget for climate adaptation program or a climate change action program, and will be used for community empowerment and youth development. That money can be matched by some of these global funds. Now, with the Environmental Protection Agency and the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, cannot talk to, say, for example, the African Development Bank or to the World Bank and said, can we work together to access, we have $10 million in our envelope national budget, but we want to opt it, it's not enough. If those global funds also see that your country is interested, with that $10 million, you can access up to $100 million from, say, the Green Climate Fund, okay? But most times our countries don't put a dime in their budget to address the issues of climate change. And we lean on the issues that, oh, it was the Westerners that created the problem, so they should spend the money to solve it. While that argument might be true, but it is also lazy because we are most vulnerable and impacted by it. So what do? We shouldn't wait and die because they're not going to spend the money, but they like to see action taken by countries and governments for which they too will support. Unfortunately, that's one of the problems that I see. Second thing is, in a negotiation, we need to be deliberate and make a request so that special funds are set aside to empower youth across Africa in addressing the issues of climate change that is not restricted to all of the bureaucracy into how to access the funding.
Okay, great. My next question, yeah, please, the floor is still open for questions, for contribution. But I want to ask this question again from Dr. Nathaniel. You also made mention of the African youth in a survival mode, making it very difficult for them to think about what they should do or the essence of thinking about tomorrow. In that sense, how does this statement affect our climate action?
Well, it affects our climate action in a way that, because, for example, the climate action has to be deliberate and innovative, meaning to be able to take deliberate steps to addressing climate change, you have to think about the future. It's about the successive generation. What we suffer today, we need to take action so that tomorrow, say, for example, simple thing like tree planting. If you initiate a process of doing planting, say 10,000 trees, it's not going to benefit you. It's going to benefit the next generation. But why will you be thinking about the next generation when you are in a survival mood today? It takes me back to my previous statement that our governments needs to be serious and deliberate about addressing the issues of climate change. All right? We need to take small action. It is only by doing that that will make the youth aware of these things and knows that they can get involved in something today and will use food for tomorrow. But if people are in the survival mode, they are more concerned about, the first law of nature is self-preservation. Can I survive today, and then we can talk about tomorrow. So until African leaders help the young people graduate from that survival mode by creating incentives and creating access to capital and finance, then they will get out of that survival mode and know that they're taking action to save the planet.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nathaniel. Okay, I'll go to Reverend Kwame Nkrumah. Kindly unmute and ask the question.
All right, thank you, Doug. Very grateful to both presentations, very insightful, and they've given us a lot of food for thought. Right. And a lot of the things said have set some of us thinking. I think I particularly liked the way the first speaker tried to relate climate change to all the sustainable development goals. It was very insightful and exciting. Then on climate action, the fact that it's a collective effort. And that is where my question leads from. She made mention of things. And of course, the second speaker also made mention of small things that can be done in when it comes to climate action. My point, and one critical one, was eating less meat or stopping the use of meat or eating meat. If I, as an individual, I should stop eating the meat, what impact does it have? Because I stop it as a single person, but psychologically, I think that everybody is eating the meat. So it's like, so at the end of the day, what impact have I made by stopping as an individual? If there was a way to quantify that, okay, if you stop, you have helped us by this margin, so that I know that in stopping, I've helped by this margin. So if my wife also stopped, that the margin goes this way. My kids also stop, it goes this way. But when it becomes a general statement, I'm thinking of the motivations. And that's how come on that score, I want to say that how can individuals and communities be motivated to adopt lifestyle that sort of help when it comes to climate action.
Climate action. Okay. So before, okay. So this question is to Dr. Amma. But before you come in, let me take another question. So after that, we can, get to our facilitators for the answers. So, Madam Theodora, I don't know if it's Group Captain Theodora Agonyo. Kindly ask your question, or Theodora Sinaya. I don't know. You can kindly unmute and ask your question. Madam Theodora, kindly unmute and ask your question. Okay, then we'll go back to Dr. Amma Gyimah to give us the answer, her response to the first question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. It's an interesting one. That the issue of climate change goes through these cycles, especially in our bid to communicate climate change and engender action. Usually when you look at the picture, it looks so broad and you want to believe that what would my little acts do to bring about the change that is needed. And so, but we know that little drops of water make a mighty ocean. So if you are doing it and I'm doing it, but talking about how we can measure our efforts, that is our carbon footprint. How can we measure how much of carbon footprint I'm reducing by this particular action I'm taking? There are methods to do that, which I am not able to go through that with you or share, but then there are methods, quite technical methods, to assess how much of your own carbon footprints you are shedding. So if that serves as a motivation or an encouragement to you to be able to take some of these practical steps, I think it will be an important place for us to explore it in the future. But I would like to say that this has gotten us to where we are because we feel like, okay, this person is doing this, so what will my little thing doing here make a difference. But I am happy we are talking to leaders, and we are not talking to ordinary people. So as leaders, we understand what it means to take the lead and to motivate others along. So I hope this can encourage us some more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I add into?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Can I add into Dr. Amman's position?
Yes.
From a conservation standpoint, we conservationists also believe that the way you encourage a change in that way it has to be a dual approach. You know, why you telling people don't eat, say for example, bush meat because you're hunting them from the forest, you're hunting them from the wild, and they're going to be extinct, and over time you not find them because the animals are the gardener of the forest. We also believe that there should be an alternative form of livelihood for the community or for the people. That will, because if someone been doing something for 30, 40, 50 years, and you try to let them change because it's maybe not too good for their health or something, you must introduce something, that will help them to adapt to. So there has to be introduced an alternative form of livelihood, which in our conservation programs in Liberia across, especially when we talk about protected area management programs, we try to introduce alternative form of livelihood to encourage people not to hunt bushmeat, but they can find domesticated meat to eat. And domesticated meat have the growing of them are confined in a little space, and so it does not have that negative impact on the environment. So I just wanted to add that. So it's a collective approach, but again, like she said, it begins with a mindset. I know there are communities where we've introduced that program and never worked because it said they're used to having certain kind of diet, and that's what they're going for. And they're still going to the wild to hunt deer meat and other meat that are forbidden. So.
Yeah, okay, sir. Reverend Kwame from I hope, do you have any follow-up questions? I can still see your hand up.
Yes, I had two questions. Other question, the issue of climate action again set me thinking. When or how can we get to the point of having schools, churches, communities, yes, have probably smaller climate action projects, such that if I enter this church, they have a climate action project. A lot of churches dotted all over, each church has a climate action project. A lot of schools dotted all over, each has a climate action project. And by that, the education travels far, quick, and wide. By what mechanism can we get to that state where we have such small projects? Not just probably from there it can trickle to individuals, but institutions, communities, district assemblies. I mean, each has a small climate action project. And then gradually we'll move from there. Is it possible to get there, and how do we get there?
Yes, and to add up to what Reverend Kwame Nkrumah Hope said, and sir, Dr. Daniel, this question goes to you because you have Dr. Nathaniel. This question goes to you because you have been at the EPA. You've been an EPA boss in Liberia, and you've been at I know it's at the government section decision making. So you have been there before. But my question is, especially when you at Ghana, currently the new buildings, the MCEs, there are buildings. You see so many of these sliding windows, so many air conditions for specific each room, one air condition, each room one air condition, and the rest. Let's look at the total emissions they are emitting, during the week, during the day, while using this electrical, appliances or gadgets. Initially, we used to have these louver blades that were being used by even schools, these government institutions, and the rest. But I don't know if it had to do with modernization or had to do with that. It had to do with the lifestyle we are copying from others or something. But now you look at most of these are institutions, the new buildings, even hospitals and the rest. Air conditions here and there. trying to close. They will create the windows, all right, but they'll put a sliding window, which is also glass, blocking the flow of fresh air into the building, and rather would want to use an air conditioner to bring in a fresh air, and in that emitting all this carbon, all these carbon emissions and the rest. So, say, by what means, and having up to what Reverend just asked, how do we bring a solution to this issue?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's not a one size fit all. It has to be a multiple approach. So I'll start from the issue of climate action projects. It's a very good idea. And I think it's about time. And these are some of the things I think those who have access to lawmakers, we need to start looking at to make sure it is inculcated in schools. Every school have a climate action program. It's inculcated in religious institutions or religious groups. A church can take a day in a month to say we're going to do conservation, we're going to do tree planting, or we're going to clean the community. We're going to do beach cleaning, some climate action that needs to be introduced. If possible, it needs to be legislated. But beyond that, the issue of leadership has to be proven. This is why I keep talking about. If you look in our national budgets, if they have money there, it's too little. If you need to pay salaries, it has nothing to support these kind of initiatives. But I think these little steps will have greater more impact on climate change, climate action than the big ones. So especially for us who are feeling the impact of climate change. And I'm in 100% support of that. I take cue from that. It's whenever I have an opportunity to propound or to inform policymakers, this is something that I'm going to take along. On the second issue of air condition consumption, now it's a twin stop. What has happened over the years, for the last 15 years, globally, we've done what we call the phase-out process. The main impact that air conditions consumption had was the CFC, what you call the refrigerant, the freon gas. They were able to phase out freon 11, freon 12, freon R21, 22, even 134A has been phased out. Those different freon gas have been phased out because they are what we call ODS, ozone depleting substances. They impact the ozone layer. And because of the widening in the ozone layer, that creates the ozone layer is the layer that protects the UVR, the ultraviolet radiation from the sun from directly affecting the earth. But because there is a hole in the ozone layer, so it keeps widening. And these gases, when it's emitted into the atmosphere, it affects the ozone layer as well. So it then increases temperature. That's why we kept having increased temperature. But what has been done globally is to face all those harmful gases that affects the ozone layer. Now, we talk about before we used to have louvers. Now we don't have louvers. We have all these kilo glasses. Some of the issue is also because of global warming. It's too uncomfortable. Before we had trees planted all around our cities. Now all of our cities, there are no trees. So the trapping of the heat. So it's unbearable for people to sit in their offices and let the window open. So that's why people, for comfort, that's where they go in the comfort of their office and put the air conditioner on. Scientists, environmentalists haven't realized that you might not easily be able to do away with the increase in temperature. You might not be able to do away with people using the air conditioner. The only thing we could do is to make it more user-friendly. So even now, the new set of air conditioners produce energy efficiency. The most it needs is a power to kick it in. The running arm is very low. And then if it runs for a certain time, it goes off. It looks like it's on, but it's off actually. The compressors in the back goes off. Once the temperature reaches a certain level, it's not running anymore. It keeps the room and the temperature running. So like some of you might know the LG air conditioner, the Samsung units, all of them now are built They are built like hybrid. Half of it consumes solar, half of it consumes energy. And the most they need is to kick it in the starting arm. When it start to run, the running arm is very low. You know, so they put in features that make it more energy efficient, because you might not be able to get away with the use of air conditioners simply because of global warming, the increase in temperature. And I was just telling you earlier that the global temperature hit the highest ever in the last maybe 10 decades. And so it's unbearable for people to sit outside, sit in their offices and, you know, without cooling system. But what scientists have done is to make it energy efficient so that even while you're using it, it does not burn more energy. And then some of the units, most of the hotels you go into, they have a system where by the time you walk out of the hotel room, everything goes off. Those are all safeguards that have been put in place to ensure that you cannot leave the hotel room and leave the air conditioner running. To leave the hotel, you have to take out the key card. And once you take out the key card, every lighting system in the place goes off, including the air conditioner. Because you're not there, nobody's going to use it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nathaniel.
Yeah.
So this last question goes to Dr. Gyimah. And this question is from Group Captain. Dr. Gyimah, you have a contribution. Yes. I'm adding this question to it. So you added to your contribution. This question from Group Captain to Birago. She says, as a young person, I was passionate about the waste management. I wanted to go into it, but couldn't get any guidance as to how to proceed. I had to abandon the idea, but I am always pained to see. I'm always pained to see much trash around us. At this point in our world, do we have any institutions, governments, or organizations prepared to support the youth in taking up waste management as a business or project? So, Dr. Gyimah, you can add it to your contribution.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. So I just wanted to make a contribution to what Reverend talked about the small action projects from churches and all that. Just a bit about the churches. Having done research into climate communication and different audiences and how they accept the issues of climate change, one thing you want to consider is that what is the belief system around churches? Most of the time you find believers thinking that climate change is just a God factor. It is a punishment or something God said will happen and it's happening. And so when you go to churches and you talk to them about climate change, you realize that majority of them think that, oh, it's something that people are saying to draw people's attention away from God's impending judgment and God's coming. And so I just want to let us have that perspective, even in our efforts to make an impact, even starting from the church. And so what some of us do is that we do audience segmentation, different audiences and different approaches to the issues of climate change. So for religious groups, you want to approach the communication on climate action from the fact that God gave us a responsibility over the environment, and it is in the interest of God, and it is one of our core responsibilities to take care of the environment. And so as a believer, you cannot fold your hands and just sit there and say that God said it will happen, and so it's happened. It is our core responsibility to take care of the environment. And so some of these areas, looking at who you are dealing with, what is their perspective, and from which angle I can address the issue of climate change, is very, very important. Doctor indicated that earlier, that leadership by example. When Doctor, you talked about our MCEs using air conditioners and all the kinds of things, I would want to say that leadership by example also comes in. If we continue to consider the number of people who don't have access to air conditions, the numerous thousands of people. So you are leading the agenda of climate change. You are trying to bring about climate action, and you are telling me to make sacrifices. You are telling me not to do this and do that. And I come and I see you trying to be comfortable and enjoying all the other things, though you say you are using them moderately or whatever it is. I think that leadership calls for drastic action, and we must be seen by our people to be committing and taking the actions ourselves. To the question you asked about the opportunities for people to go into waste management, I think that there's a waste management project that has been done in Kumasi where the waste management thing is. And so it's a project that is being done, waste to energy project that is currently happening. I do not know exactly where you can fit in, but this is to let you know that these things are happening and you can explore it. One of the huge areas is that waste collection, recycling of bottles and all that. There are opportunities that are there for you to do that separation of waste. And now people know that these materials can be used can be recycled. And so it has become a valuable area that you can explore. So I would want to encourage whoever it is that please don't lose interest. It's an emerging area calling for a lot of innovation. Read about it, look out for the opportunities and get yourself involved. As Reverend talked about the carbon calculator to encourage you, I think that I will send a link to Dr. So that he will share it with the members. There's a way that you are able to calculate your own carbon footprints. There are a number of questions that you are asked, and when you input it into the system, it tells you at the end of the day how much carbon that you have saved and how you are reducing your carbon footprint. So, Reverend, be encouraged and keep keep going vegetarian.
Yes, yes. Okay, okay. So thank you once again, Dr. Amma Gyimah. Before I hand over, our time is up. Before I hand over to the chairperson for today to conclude or to give us a closing remark. You know, we have a number of our government officials who are with us, coordinating directors, those in Accra, those at different places. We have a number of
agency and business continue
sorry,
planning and developing world looking at adaptation, and the developed world looking more at mitigation. And the examples that were given in terms of the opportunities in climate action, talking about circular economy, net zero, coming through to green building, biodiversity, linking it up to renewable energy, and then urging us to reduce our carbon footprint. They are all well noted. Corporate social responsibility, and the people who seem to be playing or taking the lead, from Leonardo DiCaprio, Jane Fonda, Meryl Streep, and Shailene Woodley. It has been very, very insightful, and thank you very much. Second presenter also spoke extensively about the waste to energy, and that we can create money out of waste, or wealth can be created out of waste, and also gave several examples. So it has been very, very interesting. I will pass it back to Dr. Birago, and serving as the chairperson, I must say a very big thank you on behalf of all the participants. We hope to hear or listen to more lectures from these two wonderful presenters. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Honorable Chair, and thank you so much, able facilitators, for giving us such a wonderful presentation. I would just like to take just a minute to give our announcements for today. And we have only one announcement, and that has to do with our membership validation seminar. The executive twin that is coming on in Kumasi. Please, we have sent emails to all members. If you have not received your official email, you can notify me on WhatsApp, and we will still forward back to you your email. And this time we are expecting very wonderful facilitators to be part of this our training. Kit Cooper will be joining us from the UK, Jamun Navani from India, and a couple of other facilitators who will be joining us for this presentation. And please, we entreat each and everyone to make it a point to attend. Okay. You know, with the mail that was sent, we've stated in it how much we are charging, the fee for the training. And you know, we have an early bird rate in the mail that was sent, and we have after the standard rate is also there. The early bird rate is around 800 cedis for the 2 days event, which comes off on the 30th to 31st of August. 30th to 31st of August. So our early bird rate is up to 1st of August. When you want to pay as a member, you pay 800 Ghana cedis for the conference. But after the after 1st August, if you want to pay as a member, you pay 1,050 for the conference. So we entreat each and every member to go through your email, read the synopsis of the training, and kindly make a decision now. So we also want to say a very big thank you to all members who made it a point to attend today's event. As a professional body and as an institute, what we seek to do is to educate our members and to ensure that our members are abreast with current issues before our leadership is what in concern. That's why we keep doing this training almost every month. So we say a very big thank you for joining this evening's meeting, and see you once again on the 30th and 31st of August at True Vine Hotel in Kumasi. Please note that our conference is a non-residential conference, but there are hotels that are available that we can recommend them to you for you to also get into those hotels. But the training itself is happening at True Vine Hotel. True Vine in Kumasi around Ahojo. It's a non-residential conference. So when you pay your training fee, we'll let you know hotels that are around so that you'll be able to book them. And please, let me also bring this to your notice. The hotels around True Vine hotels, they, you know, if you want to book them, you have to do it as soon as possible, because they host a lot of events within the center of Kumasi. So thank you once again. As we always do, you can put on your video. You can put on your video, and as we have always been doing, we give our resounding bye-bye to each and everyone. Bye-bye to each and everyone. You can put on your video. Bye-bye to each and everyone. Yes, Ibrahim, I see you. Okay, Dr. Amador, yes, I see you. So, yes, Theodora, I see you. Hey, Doreen, you're done with your banking work. I see you.
Yes.
Yes, I see you. Yes,
I know.
Yes. So thank you for making a point to join. Please, if you have not received your email, kindly send me an email. Then we'll let you have your mail sent to you. Yes, Major General. Yeah, Dr. Veneza. Yes, I see you. Able Chair, Dr. Sarkodie, I see you. So bye-bye. See you on the 31st of August. Bye.
Bye.